So for the moment, we will not take it up this one. But when there are when the data which is collected has to be presented in a graphical format, there are various alternatives which are available. That is, a bar chart can be used. Bar chart, that is with multiple components also. It's not just one bar for one particular thing. One here in this particular case, one product only is there. Product sales, um, the number of units, and each bar is representing one product. So product one, product two, product three, so on. Another type of thing is each product, there may be again another sub classification. So here in this case, it is presented that area 1, 2, 3, so on. So like that, various aspects, multi-dimensional things also can be brought into the graphs, the graphical presentation, and then that can be depicted. So it becomes easy for us to understand. See, those people who are non-financial professionals in the organization, those employees who do not understand the accounting terms and the financial aspects of it, also will be able to understand what is the performance of the organization when it is presented by way of graphical presentation. Okay, there are line graphs, then we have 5 diagrams. So if time permits at the end of it, maybe we can look into that. Um, Otherwise, we'll move ahead with this the other topics. So now from chapter 4 onwards, so whatever are the topics what we're going to look into is purely it comes into the management accounting part of it. So which has the cost aspect, the management accounting, what are the techniques which are available. Um, these aspects have to be looked into very carefully. So please learn this carefully. The concepts which are given, because this would become the base for your other things also. Conceptually, you should be sound to understand various aspects of the organization. So, given a chance, please don't put anything into selective study and then say that I don't like this topic, I don't want to study. See, please don't entertain that kind of an attitude wherein you are choosing something to study and choosing not to study also. So that part of it, please put it aside and then seriously prepare for that. Then we see here what are the cost objects, units, and centers. Cost objects, units. First thing, what is a cost object? Cost object could be a cost unit or a cost center. How do we define this? What is a cost object? Any entity with which you can assign, with which cost can be assigned, is called as a cost object. Now, examples could be um, a department, division, function, production, administration. Those are functions of business. Functions of business, production, administration, selling and distribution. Group of people, an activity, a product, a service, anything with which if cost can be assigned to those entities, we call that as cost object. Anything, any entity, any uh, the identify the amounts can be attached to that, amounts can be identified to that. Some cost is related to a particular thing, so that could be a product, service, department, unit, section, group of people, production, administration, those functions of business. See, anything, any activity, that is repairs, material movement, assembly, inspection, all these are also activities. So it could be even that also. Okay. So if the amount can be assigned to a particular cost entity, we call that to be as a cost object. Okay. It can be anything. Now, that is again subdivided. We have it as cost unit and cost center. Cost unit would be um, if the cost can be found out per unit of either a product or service. Per unit, if we can find it out as per unit of a product or service, it becomes a cost unit. Cost center is the the one second, one second. The units of a business with which the amounts can be identified, the cost can be identified, the units or department or division. So cost object is anything with which any amount can be assigned is called as a cost object. Cost units will be, if the unit cost can be found out for product or service, that becomes a cost unit. Cost center is with the department or division or anything. If the cost can be identified, we call that as a cost center. After that, um, it's I don't know whether you've learned it in your college. This is the format of a cost sheet. It's also called as a cost card, cost statement, cost sheet. So these are the terms which are used. So here we see that there are direct materials which are added. It's called as prime cost. Then there is another aspect of it, which is indirect costs are added. I'll just take you to quickly. Let's look into the classification of cost. There's one classification of cost based on identifiability. So we call them as direct cost and then indirect cost. So there is one classification of cost based on identifiability. We'll take a very small example, a simple example, try to understand what are identifiable costs. If they are identifiable, identifiability is there, then we call them as direct costs. Yes, Nandana? Someone raised the hand. Okay. Direct costs and indirect costs. Indirect costs are those costs which are not identifiable with the cost object. Okay, we'll take the example of a piece of furniture. Let's take the example. What are the costs which would be incurred? You can contribute. See, we would require wood cost. Then anything else apart from wood? A piece of furniture. Let's say a table, a chair, or something like that. For example, let's try to understand about what could be a direct cost, what could be an indirect cost. You may speak on the mic, or you can also chat, put the
Ma'am, labor cost.
labor cost. Very good. Yes. Then
Ma'am, nails.
nails, screws, bolt, those all those things. Okay. So there are set of costs, nails, screws, etc.
Ma'am, machinery.
Machinery. That's right. Then we have glue, varnish, paint, all those things. We'll put them into one category: glue, varnish, paint, um, any thing of that sort. Um, if required, steel is required, or something like that. So now, if these are the set of costs, for example, if we are looking at the production of furniture or one piece of a furniture, also a furniture, if we are in generally talking about that. See, what is the cost of wood can be identified. See how much wood will be required and how much what is the cost of that wood can be known. But on the if we are talking about the material on the same note, can we find out what is the cost of nails, those screws, etc., or cost of glue, varnish, paint, and etc. These are also material. But precisely, can we estimate how much cost would be there? These are nails and all are purchased in bulk quantity. They just dumped in the stores department. Whenever it is needed, some few pieces are taken and they are used. So also in case of these varnish and then paint, etc., these things are also purchased in big tins, and then some part of it is taken and it is used for making the furniture. So here for the item called as material, we see that there is a cost which is identified. Identifiability is there. So that's a direct cost. And there are certain other materials also which are used, but it is not identifiable. So this is called as indirect material, indirect cost. Now, similarly, now labor, if the labor is paid as per piece or number of pieces, what are his charges? If that is there, then the cost of labor is identifiable. So that becomes a direct labor. Let's say there is a cleaner, there is someone who's working in the factory premises, a cleaner or someone, then he is also paid wages, but then can we identify his wages with the uh, furniture which is made? No, it is not identifiable. So labor is identifiable, we call it as direct labor. If it is not identifiable, we call it as indirect labor. Okay. So here another example: machinery, carpentry, equipment, tools, etc. See, they are purchased to be used over a long period of time. But how much of the machinery cost or these tools cost can be assigned to per unit or few units of furniture? It is not possible to identify. So we see that costs are direct, which are identifiable. Costs are indirect when they are not identifiable. So the category of one classification of cost based on identifiability is as direct cost and indirect cost. Then there are three elements of cost, major elements of cost in a business. The costs are incurred for material, then we see for labor, and then for expenses. Anything which is incurred for acquiring the material to be used in the main production process, that's called as material cost. It could be direct material, it could be indirect material, but but material, one element of it is material. Then the cost which is incurred for those to make the payment to those workers who are involved in production process, conversion of raw material to finished goods. So that cost is called as labor cost. Anything which is not material or labor is categorized as expenses. So then again, I mentioned that the, all the costs are classified based on one classification, that is identifiability, that they are direct costs or indirect costs. So first we make a list of all the direct costs, which are direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, add them up. So that becomes the prime cost. After that, all indirect costs are to be added. But then we do not follow the same pattern of indirect material, indirect labor, indirect overheads. But at the time of adding the overheads, another format is followed wherein the functions of business are taken into consideration. What are the functions of business? We see the production function. One function is production. Another one is administration function. The third one is selling and distribution. So production, administration, and selling and distribution. These are the functions of business. So in this order, so all indirect costs incurred for production are listed first. Then all indirect costs incurred at the administration level are accounted next. Then finally, all indirect costs incurred at selling and distribution level or function we accounted later on. So when the overhead costs, the indirect costs are incurred, the indirect costs are accounted according to production overheads, then administration overhead, then selling and distribution overheads. Um, all indirect costs, there's another term for that, which is also called as overheads. If it is an indirect cost, it is another term for that is overheads. So production indirect costs are production overheads, administration overheads, selling and distribution overheads. So this is how they are accounted. This format is the condensed form of cost sheet or cost card. This is further expanded in terms of opening and closing stock also. There are three different types of inventory. That is inventory which is in the raw form, inventory which is in the um, semi-finished form. We also call it as work in process, and then inventory which is in the finished form. That conversion is completed. So we also have to make the adjustments, but I don't know whether you have that aspect here in this particular paper. This is the cost sheet, and then this is the condensed form of cost sheet. So if it arises in this paper only, you have to learn. So you will have to look into that part of it. So it explains this classifying cost. One category, one classification. There are many types or many categories of cost classification. So one classification of cost is based on elements. There are three elements: material, labor, and expenses. So these three, material, labor, expenses, can also be subclassified as direct material, indirect material, direct labor, indirect labor, direct expenses, indirect expenses. All direct expenses added together, we call them as prime cost. All the indirect expenses together are called as overheads. Then again overheads are again looked into as the production, administration, selling, and distribution. Nature of what are the nature of costs? Then again we see one classification of cost is based on the nature, that is whether it is a direct cost or indirect cost, that is whether there is identifiability or no identifiability. So in that case, if there is identifiability, they are called as direct cost. If there is no identifiability, they are called as indirect cost, or overhead cost. Then based on the functions, there are three functions of business: production, administration, selling, and distribution. Then based on behavior, costs are classified as um, so you got the first three, no? So I'm just moving ahead. Elements, there are three elements. Then nature, there are direct costs and indirect costs. All direct costs are prime cost. All indirect costs are overheads. Then based on functions, we see that functions are production, administration, selling, and distribution, uh, and finance function. The finance function is not part of accounting in cost cards. We do not account financing function in cost card, but that's also a function of business. So here in this case, we first account for all production costs, then we account for administration cost, then we account for selling and distribution cost in cost card. Then come to the cost behavior, the cost classification based on cost behavior. So there is a behavior which is observed in case of cost. We see that there are three different types of costs based on behavior. One is variable cost, one is fixed cost, one is semi-variable cost. A variation of the fixed cost. Fixed cost is a fixed cost which remains fixed, but a variation of fixed cost in the long run, when we look into that, it is also called as stepped fixed cost. I will explain all of them. The third category is semi-variable cost. So let's see what are these three things: variable cost, fixed cost, and semi-variable cost. First one, variable cost is a cost which varies proportionately with the output. Whenever the output changes, this cost also changes. The variable cost also changes. And how does it change? It changes proportionately. Let's say per unit cost is 2. For 1 unit, it is 2. 2 units, it will be 4. 10 units, it will be 10 into 2, 20. 100 units, it will be 100 into 2, 200. So as the number of units keep changing, we see that the cost also increases proportionately. As the activity increases, as the number of units keep increasing, we see that the cost increases proportionately. There's another cost There's another, before we move to the fixed cost, then we'll see. See the cost, this is the total cost. The total cost, as the number of units keep increasing, the total variable cost also increases proportionately. It starts from the origin. At origin, when the number of units are zero, the total variable cost is also zero. As the number of units keep increasing, we see that that is also increasing proportionately. Why does it increase proportionately? Because every unit cost, when it is calculated at the same rate. In this example, if it is 2 rupees per unit, every unit which is produced, it is produced at 2 rupees per unit only. So the cost per unit, this is cost per unit, whatever is the cost, that would be the same for zero number of units, 1 unit, 2 units, second unit, third unit, so on, till the nth number of unit, cost per unit remains same. Once we understand what is variable cost per unit, till the nth unit, variable cost per unit remains the same. Okay, that is the behavior, a cost that varies in total indirect proportion with the level of activity. Now this is the key point, level of activity. It doesn't change with any other thing, it only changes with activity. See, don't ever get confused that it will change with any variable. No, it changes with only one variable, which is called as the level of activity, the number of units, the production. The activity is indicated by the number of units which are produced. So that is the level of activity. As the level of activity keeps increasing, we see the total variable cost also increases, but variable cost per unit would remain the same. Then we see that the next type of cost is fixed cost, total fixed cost. So total fixed cost. Now, if we have to understand what is total fixed cost, first thing what we have to understand is what is the level of activity, or there is a term called as relevant range. Within that range, what does it mean by range? It says that from zero number of units till the maximum capacity. But then how is the maximum capacity decided? All the resources put together, whatever is the maximum output which can be produced is mentioned as the maximum capacity, or what we call it, from zero number of units till the maximum capacity, to be called as a relevant range. Within a range, so this is applicable only within when the cost is within this range. The range is from zero number of units till the maximum capacity. How do we decide on what is maximum capacity? All the resources which are put together, whatever is the maximum output which can be produced, is called as the maximum capacity. So within this range, see the cost of this fixed cost when it is incurred. Let's say if it is incurred here, it would remain same until it reaches the maximum capacity. Till the maximum capacity, or within the relevant range, any activity level, even if it is at zero number of units also, we see that the total fixed cost remains same. There would be no change in total fixed cost. This is very, you have to have this concept very clear. So it will not change starting from zero number of units till the maximum capacity. It will not change. Okay. So we see that this is at zero number of units, X is zero. At zero number of units, only the from that point onwards, it is the same. It is incurred at that level also. And then it would remain same till it reaches the maximum capacity level. So now when the output keeps increasing, cost per unit keeps decreasing. How do we calculate what is cost per unit? Cost per unit is equal to total cost divided by number of units. So we see that here we have it as total cost divided by the number of units. As the denominator keeps increasing, the total value keeps decreasing. So fixed cost per unit, because fixed cost per unit, the total fixed cost, as it would remain the same. This is the same, only the denominator is changing. So with the increase in denominator, the value, that is fixed cost per unit, keeps decreasing. That's what we see. But that happens only until a point, and then it it stops there. It doesn't further decrease. That is, it doesn't go and touch zero, or it goes below zero. That doesn't happen. It is the same until a particular point. Okay. Is this clear? So if this is clear, we'll move to the next one. Then we see that I'm mentioning that this is applicable only within a relevant range, within a range of activity. This is applicable. So what does it mean? If uh, the output or the number of units produced exceed the maximum capacity, so that doubt also would arise. What if it exceeds the maximum capacity? Then if it exceeds the maximum capacity, then fixed cost also increases. The concept of the cost being fixed, it doesn't change, is applicable only within that range. So in the long run, as they exceed the output, as they exceed the output, so if they go beyond this maximum capacity, if the output produced is beyond the maximum capacity level, if they have to cross this, but this is fixed only till this particular point. If they have to cross beyond the maximum level, then this also will increase. Then again, it remains the same until the next capacity level. So we see that fixed cost is same until it reaches the maximum capacity. Then at this point, it again increases. After increase, we see that this is again fixed until it reaches the next capacity level. Okay. So it goes on increasing when the capacity level increases. So that's the concept of uh, stepped fixed cost. So this is applicable in the long run. Okay. A fixed cost which is only fixed within a certain level of activity. Within a certain level of activity, we see that this is applicable. But as the level of activity keeps increasing, we see that the fixed cost also increases, but it doesn't increase proportionately. It increases, it remains the same until the next activity level. So such type of cost, we call that to be as step fixed cost. Once the upper level is reached, a new level of fixed cost becomes relevant. Then we see the third category. The third category of cost, we call that to be as semi-variable cost. What is the semi-variable cost? Semi-variable, another term also, it is called as semi-fixed cost. Semi-variable or semi-fixed cost. What is a semi-variable cost? Which is partly fixed and partly variable. So the nature of cost is such that there is one component in that cost which is fixed. Then the other part of it keeps varying. The example what we can quote is, you must be aware of how the telephone bills are calculated. I mean, how the telephone bill is charged, or the postpaid mobile phone bills, how they are charged. See, we see that there is a component called as fixed cost, that is fixed monthly rent or monthly plan. There's some plan, or in case of telephone bill, we see that there is a fixed monthly cost, some minimum rent. In case of electricity bill, there is some minimum amount which has to be paid irrespective of the usage. Even if you do not make even one single call, also the cost has to be paid. That has to be paid. Okay. That is fixed in nature. So even if the usage is zero number of units, there is absolutely no consumption also, because there is a fixed cost, fixed element in that. There is one fixed cost. Then over and above that, see, when they according to the plan, you see that some minimum number of calls are allotted, But if the usage is beyond that, then again we see that the fixed this cost also increases based on the consumption. Okay, that portion is the variable. So we see that the cost curve, the total cost curve, is not starting from origin. This is origin, but it is starting from this point. Why is it starting from this point? Because at this point already we see that there is a fixed cost. So that would remain the same. Even at zero or at the maximum capacity, we see that there is fixed cost incurred. So on account of that, we see the cost is not starting from the cost is not starting from origin, but it is starting from another level, that is after above the origin. So we see that that is partly fixed. A particular component of it is a particular component of the cost is fixed. The rest of it is variable. So it is called as a semi-variable. There's another term also called as semi-fixed cost, either semi-variable cost or semi-fixed cost. So the cost per unit also decreases as the output level keeps increasing, because the fixed component which is there, it remains the same. On account of that, though the variable cost per unit is variable cost is increasing, but the fixed cost doesn't increase. So on account of that, we see that the cost per unit keeps decreasing. Fixed costs are constant in total, variable costs are constant per unit. This part you have to very, very clearly register in your mind. Total fixed cost is constant, but variable cost per unit is constant. Fixed cost per unit keeps decreasing. If we have fixed cost and variable cost, the first one is total cost. Total fixed cost is constant. It's the same. Okay, variable cost, this is constant. Let me put it as constant or fixed in nature. So this is fixed in nature. The same amount, the total fixed cost is the same. But remember that it's the same within the relevant range. But once the range exceeds, this also increases. So that is stepped fixed cost. But variable cost changes proportionately. It is not constant, it changes proportionately. Then the cost per unit. If we are talking about cost per unit, the fixed cost per unit keeps changing. This one changes. It increases or decreases based on the changes in the output. But the variable cost per unit, it remains constant. This part of it you have to have the clarity. Very clearly it has to be registered in your mind. So variable costs are constant per unit. Semi variable costs are neither constant in total nor constant per unit. Stepped fixed cost will be constant in total within a certain range. Now, how do we separate these semi-variable cost? We will take up a numerical question based on high-low method. I want all of you also to open your notebook. We will work out on high-low method. Be ready with your notebooks. See, this is your exam kit. Management Accounting Exam Kit. Question number 62 on the screen. Do you see that? The following data relate to the overhead expenditure of contract cleaners at two activity levels. So something is given. Using the high-low method, what is the estimate of the overhead cost if 16,200 square meters are to be cleaned? Just now we have learned about what is a variable cost. Once again, what is a variable cost? A cost which varies proportionately with the output. What is a fixed cost? Which does not vary, it remains constant, it remains fixed irrespective of the output level. Then what is a semi-variable cost? Is a cost which varies but does not vary proportionately because of the fixed cost which is included in that. If we are to estimate the fixed cost, it is easy, it would be the same. There is no issue with estimating fixed cost. If we are to estimate the variable cost, then also that there is no issue with that. We can, once we know what is variable cost per unit for any activity level, variable cost can be calculated. But semi-variable cost is not so. Semi-variable cost, there is an issue that there is a part of it is which is variable, a part of it which is fixed. Therefore, we cannot estimate what is the semi-variable cost at any given activity level. So in such case, if we have to find out what is the cost, what is the semi-variable cost for a particular activity level. Let's say if variable cost per unit is 5 rupees per unit. So we can estimate what is it at 100 units, we can estimate it at 500 units, 1000 units, or any activity level. Take the activity level, the number of units, multiply it into cost per unit. As simple as that. Total fixed cost, once it is known, it would remain same until it reaches the maximum capacity. That is also possible to estimate. But then, is that the same case with the semi-variable cost? No. Fixed cost is fixed. Then variable cost portion, we have to understand. We have to first know what is the variable cost portion, then separate that and then estimate it. So in this process, there is one method called as the high-low method, which helps us to estimate the semi-variable cost. So question number 62 from the examination kit, we'll take it up and then solve this particular question. One second. Actually, this is a protected version. We are unable to copy it. Um, Try it in another way. I'll do one thing. I'll show some other question wherein we can work out the high-low method, or maybe I'll put the okay, I'll scribble it here only. Normally we do it in the Excel sheet. I will copy the content here. We see that square meters cleaned. So I'm just typing this one. By tomorrow, we'll sort it out, this particular issue. 12,750. And the other one, 15,100 for the other one. Then we have overheads. Seventy-three thousand nine hundred and fifty. Then 83,585. So please look into this particular question. Using the high-low method, what is the estimate of the overhead cost if, see, there are two activity levels which are given. If the square meters cleaned are, if the square meter cleaned are 12,750, for that the total cost incurred is 73,950. If the square meters cleaned are 15,100, the overhead cost is 83,585. Okay. After that, they are asking us to estimate the overhead cost if the activity level is 16,200. So that's the question here. So I just copied the data. You understood, no? Using the high-low method, what is the estimated cost? So let me put you to the Excel sheet. We will work out the question in the Excel sheet. So there are two different activity levels which are given. One is a high level, which is 15,100 meters cleaned. The activity of 15,100 meters are cleaned. The second level is 12,750 meters cleaned. So each level there is a cost which is given. So the method used is called as high-low method. So question number 62, for that we are doing the solution. So this is high-low method. There are two things which are given. One is square meters cleaned. The next one, it's overheads. First, take the height. I hope you are able to see the Excel sheet, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Take the high first. High activity level is 15,100 meters. And the overhead cost at high level is 83,585. Low level is at 12,750 meters. And then 73,950 is the cost. So what does it indicate? When the activity was 12,750, cost was 73,950. So when the activity moved from 12,750 to 15,100, the cost also increased from 73,950 to 83,585. So we see that there is a change. When the activity changed, the cost also changed. So what's the activity? The difference in these activity. So the difference is when the units changed by 2,350, cost changed by 9,635. So we observe that when the number of units increased from 12,750 to 15,100, cost increased from 73,950 to 83,585. Why would it change? It would change on account of the variable cost. So whatever is the change, whatever is the difference, whatever is the increase in the cost, when from low level to high level it has moved. So the increase in cost is all on account of variable cost. So this portion of it is variable in nature. So if it is variable in nature, let's find out what is variable cost per meter. So variable cost per unit will be 9,635 divided by 2,350. Check that out. 4.1 per square meter. So we understood what is variable cost per unit. That unit is per square meter. So variable cost per square meter is equal to 4.1. But then now we have to find out what is the fixed cost. So semi-variable cost is basically partly variable and partly fixed. So the other part of it which is fixed in nature has to be understood. So unless and until we know both the variable component and fixed component, we will not be able to estimate it at any other activity level. So for us to estimate it at any activity level, we need to know both the components, the variable component and the fixed component. How do we find out what is the fixed cost? Any activity level can be selected. So we need to select any activity level. So let's select the at 15,100 units, that's square meters. We understand total cost is equal to, what's the total cost? At 15,100, it is 83,585. From that, less variable cost. But what's variable cost? Variable cost, we got it as 4.1. 4.1 into 15,100. The total cost is 83,585. The variable cost is 61,910. If this variable cost is deducted from total cost, the resultant figure is fixed cost. So this would be fixed cost, total fixed cost. So you may be wondering whether we would get the same thing if we select another activity level, that is 12,750. What if we select that? Would we get the same value? Let's verify that if we would get the same value or not. In fact, in the examination, you don't have to test it out with two different activity levels. One is sufficient, but then because um, we also have to understood whether it will be the same or not. Just to test that, I'm showing you to work it out with another activity level, which is 12,750. At 12,750, what is the total cost? The total cost is 73,950. What's the variable cost? Variable cost at this level is equal to 12,750 into 4.1. So when we deduct the variable cost, we got the fixed cost. So we see any activity level, because the total fixed cost would be the same. So any activity level, when it is selected and we separate the variable component of it, we get the fixed cost, and it would be the same at any activity level. So that's the main point there. So we now know what is the variable component, variable cost per unit. We also know what is the total fixed cost. So the question is asking us to estimate the cost at, the question is asking us to estimate the cost is 16,200 square meters. What is the estimate of the overhead cost if 16,200 square meters are to be cleaned? Estimated cost first, we have to take what is variable cost. So variable cost is calculated as, what is the variable cost per unit? 4.1. So 4.1 into how many square meters are they looking at? 16,250. Then we know what is the total fixed cost. Fixed cost is 21,675. Add them up, we would get the total cost. So total cost 88,300. So is that the option among them? 88,300. Did I copy all the data properly?
Ma'am, it's
Ma'am, it's
16,200.
16,200.
Which one? Variable cost.
Overhead cost, ma'am. Overhead cost 16,200.
Not 250. Okay, okay, okay. The activity is 16,200. Okay. 16,200. So the answer, we got it as 88. Usually we can copy this, but I don't know why is it not allowing, because it's, I think it is a secured version that it is not allowing me to copy. Generally we copy that and side by side the question and answer would be there. I will figure it out how do we enable it to copy it. So for the, from the next class onwards, any question which we are doing, we would have both of them next to each other, and it becomes easy for us to take it up. So at 16,200, we got the cost to be as 88,095. Any doubts, any one of you? How do we do? The method itself is called as high-low method. So one activity level which is at high, one activity level which is at low, take both of them and then find out the difference in the units as well as the cost. So the, if there is any amount which is changing, that is all on account of the variable component, the variable nature of the cost. So we find out what is variable cost per unit. Then deducting this variable cost from the total cost at any given activity level, we arrive at what is the fixed cost. So once the variable cost per unit and the total fixed cost is known, we will be able to estimate the total cost at any activity level. It becomes possible for us to estimate it at any activity level. So that is the method. So please practice. If you come across any such questions, please practice. There's another way in which the cost relationship can be presented. It can be presented in a linear relationship. So we'll see what is that meaning of linear relationship. The total cost can be now it has a linear relationship. It can be presented with an equation y is equal to a plus bx. So that equation can be used to uh, describe the relationship um, between the activity level and the total cost. So it is in the linear relationship, linear function, so which can be presented with an equation called as y is equal to a plus bx, wherein there are two constants, a and b are two constants. X is an independent variable, y is dependent on x. Unless and until x is known, y cannot be known. So x is an independent variable and that is the number of units or the activity level. So y is total cost, x is the activity level or what we call it as number of units. So if the number of units are known, then total cost can be calculated. Now then we see in the equation there are two other variables a and b. Both of them are constant. So the relationship is presented by this particular equation. So now when we look into this equation, there is a sum of two particular items. First part of it is a, which is a constant. The second part of it is a constant which is multiplied with x with number of units. So as the number of units keep changing, this portion of it also keeps changing by the value of b. So as the number of units keep changing, we see the second part of the equation bx also changes. So from this, what do we understand? The first constant a is constant, which is fixed. Fixed cost is also constant in nature. So a represents the total fixed cost. Bx represents the total variable cost. Variable cost varies proportionately with the output, proportionately with the number of units. So when the number of units keep changing, the second part of it, which is bx, also changes proportionately because b is a constant. So as the number of units increase, bx also increases. If the number of units decrease, bx also decreases. So it changes in the same direction as x, as the activity level, as the number of units. Adding up a and bx, we would have what is the total cost. So that is this is a linear equation. Okay, cost equations are assumed to have a linear function and therefore the equation of a straight line can be applied. So then with the help of this, we can project this, we can plot these values on the graph and then fix a line, and then that is a straight line, but that straight line starts from the point of what is the fixed cost. If the fixed cost is incurred at this point, from here it keeps increasing by the value of variable cost. It keeps increasing as the activity level keeps increasing from the point of fixed cost. Okay, so this is the total cost. I hope it is clear.
Clear, ma'am.
What are cost codes? Code is a system of symbols designed to be applied to a set of items to give a brief, accurate reference, which helps entry into the records, correlation, and analysis. See, when there are multiple items of cost like overheads or anything, um, any transaction, any activity, any overhead amount. So how do they identify is they allot certain codes. Codes are allotted. Then it becomes easy to verify in future. So the codes which are allotted, code is a system of symbols designed. So it could be numeric 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. In numeric only, there are multiple ways. We have the numbers, number system 1, 2, 3, 4, Roman number system, which is written um, then subcategory of that will be further used with the small number. The Roman number one is small letters. So that way, or it can be with alphabetical numbers or alphabets. Alphabets like A, B, C, D, capital A, B, C, D, or small a, B, C, D, so on. Or could be a combination of numbers and alphabets, alphanumerical, or certain special symbols also can be used. So there are various ways in which codes are allotted. That is easy for them to have a proper classification identified by the codes. So that is the various ways in which the codes can be used. Then we come to the next topic called as materials. That's the first element of cost. Material is the first element of cost. What is material cost? Material is the main component which is used in the production. This is a component of the cost of production, a major component in the cost of production. How is material managed? The material has to be purchased from the external source. There is a supplier present there. From the supplier, the material has to be purchased. But the normal procedure, how it takes place in a business, it is not that the way we walk into a store or a room or showroom and then purchase it, randomly pick out anything and then purchase it. It doesn't happen in case of a business. When material has to be purchased, first step is the suppliers are called or asked to submit a quotation or a tender for the material. So they are asked, all of them are asked to give the details about what is the price at which they would be providing the material, what is the quality, other aspects, other details about it, the time which is required for them to deliver, etc., etc. All those details they would submit it on request by the business. So business places an order. So specifically in the business, a purchasing department places an order with the supplier. uh, First they ask them to submit the quotation. From among the quotations which are submitted by the suppliers, one one supplier is selected, order is placed with the supplier. Then supplier takes his time to deliver the material. When the material is received from the supplier, it is not directly received and then put to use. The material is received. The normal procedure is it is received at the factory gate. It is checked for its quality. See, not all of them can be checked, but randomly something would be checked for its quality. Then the material will be moved to the store